To understand why it is so hard to radically change, let's start with a short history lesson. In 1934, the New York Central Railroad opened the High Line, an elevated freight rail that connected Manhattan's West Side yards at 34th Street to St. John's Terminal at Spring Street in Soho. The most innovative feature of the High Line was the fact that it went right through many of the buildings that it served, offloading goods inside these openings. The reason behind building the High Line was that in 1869, the New York Central merged with street-level railroad tracks on the 10th and 11th Avenues. In horse and carriage days, operating a street-level railroad was dangerous. In 1852, a law was passed stating that a mounted cowboy had to ride in front of the trains to alert pedestrians and vehicles. That still wasn't enough. In 1908, the city's Bureau of Municipal Research reported that since 1852, the trains had killed 436 people. Both 10th and 11th Avenues became known as Death Avenue. Protests were mounted, plans were made, but it wasn't until 1929 that the city agreed to build the High Line. Imagine the radical changes those people lived through. First trains, then accidents, then trains in the sky, and suddenly, sky trains running through buildings long before the concept of just-in-time logistics was invented. Then suddenly, 1980, the High Line was closed. The elevated tracks sat dormant and became overrun with a wide variety of plants, visited only by photographers and urban explorers. Park advocates, inspired by the inadvertent meadow the High Line had become, lobbied for its conversion into a public park. The conversion of an elevated railway into a park had been done only once before at the Promenade Plantée in Paris. The new park, which was opened in the summer of 2009, was designed by James Cornerfield Operations and Diller, Scofido and Renfro, with planting designer Pete Oduf. Their design recreated the natural landscape that had formed on the tracks and recalled its former use by reusing the rails of the abandoned freight line while making it safe and enjoyable for public use. Another radical change. Sometimes we cannot see, sometimes we cannot imagine something we simply do not know. To quote Joseph Schumpeter, who lived 1883 to 1950, "Innovation is creative destruction, where entrepreneurs combine existing elements in new ways." Now, what could be a better place than the High Line for letting Magnus Painker guide you through radical innovation and how to deal with it?
We deal with two units that can't easily be divided: infinity and uncertainty. And in turbulent times, you need to cope with an infinite way of possibilities and totally uncertain outcome. So it's inspiring standing here on High Line, where the humanity shows that we can actually turn things into something totally new, a total radical change, and many times. So during this course module, we will learn how to cope with radical innovation and how to get prepared for that. There is a number of misconceptions on the market that radical innovators are propeller heads. That's simply not true. In our science and research we made over the years, we have proven with data from many thousand organizations all over the world that radical innovators are more mature when it comes to ideation, product selection, development and commercialization, and there's a reason for that. They are structured, and they learn to structure and cope with uncertainty and with infinity.
Working with innovation management call for leadership. There is a model defined by Love, Williamson and Wood back in 2001, defining 5 types of leadership style for innovation management. We have mapped these 5 types of leadership styles towards the data in our database. And we found that there are specific leadership styles that are more suited for what we call the third horizon, where you deal with the unexpected. And there are other leadership styles which is much more efficient in the first horizon, where you work with improvements, step by step, very systematic. And other leadership styles are better off for the second horizon, where you work with prototyping and piloting. So let's start with the first horizon. That's where the spiral staircase makes sense. A leadership style where you work step by step, very systematic towards a defined goal. That would be pretty hard if you go for the third horizon, because you might not even know what is going to be, or what's going to happen, or what kind of inventions that are around the corner. Like the High Line. Who can imagine that the High Line, created to avoid accidents, should be turned into like a big garden? Then we have the leadership style that is much more suited for the third horizon, which is the explorer. It's a leadership style where you do not demand any profit or short-term return. You just demand learning, insights, understanding. In the middle, in the second horizon, that's typically where the cauldron and the fertile field will do. The cauldron is an entrepreneurial style where you throw things into the cauldron and see what's happening. Boom, an explosion. Or maybe nothing happens. Or a little fire, or it boil over. The fertile field is where you put up the seed and see what's happening and start growing. Maybe become a beautiful garden. But it could also be a forest. So the disadvantage with the fertile field is that you maybe need to remove things to learn to close down projects. And the cauldron, well, apparently it could have some side effects that might not be desirable. And then we have the Pac-Man style, which is pretty much about making small bets, investment, outsource, finance startups, buying back. And that could be an alternative way of funding and nurturing the first, second, and third horizon. By applying advanced correlation analysis, we have been able to identify a number of capabilities that support radical innovation in the second and in the third horizon. The first one is about decision making, to be able to make decisions under uncertainty and with an infinite number of possible outcomes. That is possible to train, hard but possible. The second one is experiments with clear hypotheses, where you accept, react, or refine hypotheses based on the outcome of the experiments. The third one is ideation, to be able to internally and externally engage and inspiring from living ideas, putting up clear hypotheses, doing experiments, grouping ideas into new group of ideas. We call that clusters. Putting up hypotheses for the clusters. And eventually, in an iterative process, being able to actually make a decision based on experiments and hypotheses and maybe 1,000 or 10,000 of ideas internally and externally. The fourth capability is cross-functional capability. Breaking down silos, being able to work cross-functional in the organization, which put perspective on things and could actually uncover new possibilities. The fifth one is driven by purpose, to have a clear idea why we go to work every day and use that as a compass. The sixth one is being open-minded, to invite, engage, share, and eventually grow the pie. And then you can slice up the pie. By just being protective, the pie will be very small. By doing generous and engaging activities, you will grow the pie. And then you can fight over the pie, and the piece of pie you got will be much larger than having the whole small pie. Learning oriented, to be able to learn, to challenge and relearn, and sometimes actually unlearn old behavior. And the eighth one is to be what I call anthropologist, or having an anthropological approach, to watch, not necessarily interfere, not asking the customer clients what they want. Instead, study their behavior, see how they react, to understand the true need. Based on the work by Tim Kelly at IDEO in Palo Alto, there are 10 personas that culturally wise are very useful when working with innovation, and especially radical innovation. The first one is the anthropologist. The second one is the experimenter. And the third one is the cross-pollinator. These three personas are the learning personas in an organization that try to figure out, what's going on here? And could I somehow do some experiments? And how can I engage people from other organizations or also outside the organization? Having these three personas in place will make the first phase, the explorative phase of innovation, much more easier. Then we have the organizational personas that are very useful when you come into doing prototypes and start developing. The first one is the hurdler. The hurdler do not see any hurdlers anywhere, they just jump over them. The second one is the collaborator, that make team work really good together. And the third one is the director, pointing out the direction. When you complement the three first personas with the hurdler, the collaborator and the director, you will have what you need to be able to work with the prototyping and the development phase. In the later stage of development and the commercialization phase, there are 4 more personas that are very supportive. The first one is the experience architect that is focusing on world-class experience. The second one is the set designer creating the scene. The third one is the storyteller, constantly telling stories and retelling stories. And the last one is the caregiver, making sure that everybody is seen and involved. Innovation management is like a big puzzle. Everything is right in front of you. The question is what you do with it.